Let's be real. This isn't just another startup podcast. We are not here to hype hustle culture or talk about unicorns like they are everywhere. And definitely not giving out 10-step formula to crush it. But our guest today, he is not your typical academic either. He's a PhD student, a design science nerd, a policy thinker, and maybe the only person who can actually make institutional theory sound interesting. Welcome to School to Startup, brought to you by Tracxn, a private market intelligence platform that's been helping the startup world for over a decade now. We work with universities across the world that are building innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. And this series is all about the people behind that work. I'm Harish, and today I'm joined by Bugra. He's the PhD candidate and research assistant at ESCP Business School, and also the community manager at the Center of Design Science and Entrepreneurship. Bugra, great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation and the really kind words.
Great. So let's start from the top, right? So, how did you end up in academia? What's the journey be like?
Mhm. I mean, actually, it was some kind of a journey to get into academia. So when I finished my high school in Germany, so I was born and rose up in Germany. I started to work in a bank. I did a apprenticeship over there, and during the time, I realized that I want to gather more knowledge about finance, about management, and especially also about economics. And then I had the chance to study my bachelor's at the University of Wuppertal. During the time, it was for me more clear to go into consultancy or doing some kind of strategy. And I took the chance to do some internships. I worked in a German blue chip corporation in the CFO department. I was in the strategy department, but I also was in the consultancy firm. And based on that, I decided also to study international in a double degree program at the Cattolica in Lisbon at the ESCP Business School in Paris. However, when I started my master's studies, I realized that I wanted more. So I wanted to learn more. I wanted to use the knowledge in a more useful way, because if you're working in the strategy department or also in the consultancy, you really learn how to use limited information to answer really bold questions. And for me, it was sometimes a bit too short. So I wanted to go deeper into the understanding, and also want to sit longer on really important questions rather than just scribbling them over a night for a nice presentation. And with every week, I realized during my studies that I want to go into research. And then I had the great chance to be as a junior researcher in Vietnam for a German nonprofit organization. I was there around about 3 months, and I did a lot of research there about 2 policy papers. I had a great opportunity to work with the Vietnamese universities over there, and that was for me the click moment where I realized, okay, I want to do it after my master's. I want to do research. I want to stay at the university. But it was, once again, it was a journey. So a lot of thoughts behind that, and I'm super happy now with my role that I have at the ECP in Berlin.
Amazing. And right now, what's something you're working on that's got you genuinely excited?
So currently my overall research theme, I would say, it is the interaction of politics and entrepreneurship. So on one hand side, I'm quite interested in understand on how entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurs have an influence on the political agenda, something that is getting more and more important. For example, if you're looking in the US, what's going on there with the Silicon Valley elites and their behavior towards the current US administration. But on the other hand side, I'm also interested on how politics and especially entrepreneurial policies are shaping entrepreneurship. So my deepest belief, I would say, is that entrepreneurship is the crucial driver for innovation. So we need entrepreneurs to have innovation, to have economic growth, and this economic growth leads to better societies. And therefore, it's also quite interesting to understand how politics and how the political agenda can shape good entrepreneurship that is good for innovation. It is super broad.
Amazing.
So I'm doing everything behind that. So it is super broad and different topics around that.
Really love that. Before we go deeper, a quick pause for our viewers. If you're enjoying this conversation, go ahead and hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to the Tracxn channel. We've got more episodes coming up talking to people who are shaping how the next gen builds, leads, and learns. Right. Let's keep going then. Let's talk about the startup space a bit, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot happening, be it
Absolutely.
AI, climate, or creator economy. From your view, what trends should students really be paying attention to?
I mean, there are a lot of trends going on. So, I mean, you already mentioned AI. It is probably the most interesting and most used buzzword. So, I was at the Academy of Management, so it's the biggest management conference in the world, and I think every second paper was some kind of AI. So, it is definitely has a huge impact, not only in the academic world but also in real world practice. However, what I would say, what is kind of a trend in the next few years is that there is a change on which kind of ventures and startups are arising. So in the last 10 to 15 years, I would say it was a lot of software-based innovation. So, there was an app was built and there was the idea to build big marketplaces and so on and so forth. But this is now changing. So now we are getting more into deep tech innovation and deep tech startups. So if you now as an entrepreneur want to make a bold idea happen, you need a lot of money forefront. So you need the capabilities and also the resources to build some kind of a prototype and to show that this is working. And in the last 10 to 15 years, it was a little bit more different. So you could just build a small app and then you can roll it out, you can test it on the market, and based on the market feedback, you can improve it. And I would say this is some kind of changing now, if you're looking at the unicorns that are rising. Because they all now really need high technical knowledge and a lot of resources at the beginning to build the first solution that you can present. And this is kind of contrary to the stuff that happened in the last 10 to 15 years.
Interesting. And how's academia keeping up with those changes? Are we actually preparing students for what's out there, or do you think there's still a gap?
I mean, there's always a gap, I would say. It really depends on which kind of institution in the end you are. So what I would argue it is, as a student, it's quite important, especially during these times, is that you can adapt quite easy and fast, because the world is changing out there faster and faster, and you really need to learn how to adapt fast and also to understand what kind of impact these innovations could have. So I would say at ECP, the students are getting prepared quite good, because it's not one topic and you're just getting an expert in this topic. It's more the idea of getting a more general education, but also have the time and the resources to develop your personality, because I think that's the most important part as you grow as a human being in a university and acquire social and personal skills, and especially acquire the understanding of critical thinking. Because if you're able to really think critical and really to understand what's going on there and which kind of impact all these innovations and solutions can have outside, I would say then you are also easy to adapt to new situation, and then you're also able to acquire the knowledge that is needed. So, for example, I'm doing a bit of research on the new space economy, so the commercialization of the space sector, and this is highly technical. So this is really technical stuff that's going on there. But if you have the interest in doing business there, so to be an innovator in this kind of an area, I think you can acquire the knowledge by yourself. So you don't really need this university that gives you all the slides that is needed, because in today's time everything is online. You can get it there, but you need this willingness and the understanding and the critical thinking, and also getting stuff into perspective to be successful. And this is really institutional and university based. How this is lived, and from ECP perspective, I would say we're doing a quite good job over there.
Very interesting. So you are big on design science, right? But most of the startup founders don't really use that term. Let's say someone is building something from their garage, right? So how does this design science actually help them?
So I mean, the design science is a quite special research methodology, because if you, and this is, I personally, I would say it's one of the biggest gaps that we currently have in academia, is If you're looking at the papers that are published in the top journals, on general and academic journals, it is a descriptive nature in this paper. So the scholars and the researchers are going out there and they try to describe the world. Yeah, so they try to build models and they try to explain something, and they would say, okay, so if you're doing this, it will lead to that. Or I would like to understand why people are doing some kind of action, and I would like to describe it as best as possible. However, the usefulness of this generated knowledge it's most of the times not really there. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're going into university and you're reading the entrepreneurship papers and the innovation papers, and in most cases, I would say they're not really useful for you. But it is useful, for example, to use something like the business model canvas. Yeah, so there is this canvas, you can use it and you can try to plot your startup to have better understanding. And the idea of design science research is exactly that. So not only describe what is going out there, but also to build solution and build knowledge that is useful for entrepreneurs. And this is the whole idea of design science. And the whole idea of our center is to say, okay, we don't just want to describe problems, we want to solve problems, and want to solve problems in an academic way. And for students, it is a great opportunity, especially for bachelor and master theses. So, for example, I'm supervising bachelor master theses, and what I'm telling my students is always, you're creating here something. So you're creating knowledge that is useful, that you can use in the outer world. So normally when people are writing a master thesis, it's just like they're writing it and they get a good grade or not so good grade, and then it's end up in a bookshelf, and it is. So no one cares about that because it's not useful out there. But with a design science, a research perspective, or design science research approach, they can actually use this knowledge in their own career, and then can say, okay, I built here something, it is useful, it is working, and based on that, we have new knowledge on how to solve the problems instead of just describing what's going on there.
Amazing. And any student projects recently that really impressed you? Something where you thought they are into something, and do you think their academic environment played a part in that?
So to the first part of the question, recent. So last semester, for example, I supervised theses on assessment tools. So this was really quite interesting because the whole topic was about to understand how corporates and startups are working together. Because normally you're a big corporation and you say, so I want to work with startups together. So let's build an incubator, or let's do some corporate entrepreneurship, for example, or let's build a corporate venture fund, and so on and so forth. But if you're looking in the data, a lot of companies are not really successful with that. And the problem is there's, for example, different culture, there's not really the resources. Also the knowledge within the people that are working in the corporations is not really there on how to behave with startups. And what we actually did together with the students was to build an assessment tool to understand, so what are the dimensions that you need to understand from the corporate side to evaluate it so it can be successful in a startup corporation. So for example, we did a framework, and one dimension was culture. So and we built some questions to ask that corporates can ask themselves, and they can say, okay, are we fulfilling these dimensions or not? And if not, we need to improve ourselves before we even start working with startups together. So if you, for example, have a super high hierarchy and there's really everything super formal, and we have really clear structures, and how the way of knowledge is distributed in a company is really clear and structured, it is probably quite difficult to work with startups because it is a completely different way how they work. And this kind of assessment tool is exactly that. So there is a problem, it is not working, startup corporate collaboration, and we build a solution on that. With that, to the second part of how academia can contribute to that. I mean, it's that. So there is really a contribution that is useful for the practical world, and it can be used in the outer world. And it is also knowledge that is out there that can be improved. I mean, it was a first starting point, and now you can build on this first starting point and can say, maybe there is one dimension is missing, or we have to go in this dimension a little bit better to really understand even better how a startup corporate collaboration could look like. So, and this is, I would say, academia all about to generate knowledge, but the knowledge that is generated needs to be useful and not just describing a lot of interesting things that are out there.
Amazing. So you spoke about the cultural things as well, right? So you have done research in very different places like Vietnam, Europe, and more. Uh, how much does a local context matter when it comes to entrepreneurship?
I would say it's the most important part. So if you, I mean, first of all, we have to think about what is entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is those people that are looking for opportunities and are executing for them. And I mean, if you're talking about entrepreneurs, in most cases, we have this fancy entrepreneurs, unicorn led ventures, but in the most cases, entrepreneurs are also those people that are doing small stuffs. I mean, small stuff in brackets. So these are people that are in the community and try to improve the community. And I would say the community is the most important part to be a successful entrepreneur, because in the first step you need to understand the problem, because as an entrepreneur you're always solving problem. That is your main issue. And if you're not located in a community and you don't know what are the problems in the community, I would argue it's quite difficult to be successful as an entrepreneur, because in the most cases, entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs at universities, they're creating some kind of problems, because they say, okay, I think this is a problem out there, and I asked to 3 of my university colleagues, and this also told me that is a problem. But if you are in a community with real people out there, and you really try to understand what their problem is, and then you're offering a solution, and there is a market, and the market in the end decides if your solution is good or not, you will have really early a good feedback loop on to understand how to improve it, and based on that you can really scale it. So you can build on this small solution, this small community, and really you try to scale it, because then you realize, oh, this problem is not only in my community, it is maybe also in a community in the neighborhood, or it's also in a community in another city, and then you can, based on that, you can scale it. But it is a bottom-up approach, and the community is the key factor here.
Amazing. So these academics, they love frameworks, and founders also love winging it, right? So how do you personally balance that? Have you ever had a moment where your research looked great on paper, but completely fell apart in a real life?
Um, yeah, it is sometimes kind of the problem, and there's this question on so what. I mean, you're doing research, and the answer is based on this paper. It is super nice and super knowledgeable, and then there's this answer of so what. So, for example, one of my best friends, he is in the 4th generation of a company, and he's a really entrepreneur, So he's really was born into an entrepreneurial family, and he's doing quite a good job. And when I'm talking about my entrepreneurship research, in most cases, I realize it is completely not really useful for him, because he's asked me always this question. It's like, yes, so what does it mean for me as an entrepreneur when I'm doing my business? And what I realize is that on the one hand, you need to be able to communicate it. So you really need to understand and say, okay, that this is the research out there, but it is on a really abstract and general level. And what does it mean if you really try to break it down to one single corporation? And this is kind of an important step that I think that you also have to do as a researcher. And the second part is and here design science comes into play. It's the idea not just describing it to build solutions. And the assessment tool, for example, this is something this is practical knowledge. And you could say, so here's a framework, you can use it. It is tested in the practical world, and it is actually working. And this is improvement for you. And I think this is also the way academia has to go, because if you're looking into the academic conversation that we have out there, there's a lot of talk about impact. So people want to improve, people want to do stuff better. Academia wants to make a positive impact on the world, and I think it starts at the point when we're solving problems and not describing them.
Interesting. Talking about the design science itself, right? I'm just curious. If you had a €1 for every time someone said design science sounds like a UX for philosophers, how close would you be to funding your own startup, or at least a really good espresso machine in Berlin?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with design science is it's quite at the beginning of and I mean, especially in academia, stuff takes a lot of time. I mean, there's this. I mean, I picked it up somewhere, so probably have to double check it. But there is this saying by Kahneman, who wrote this: "Think slow and fast." something like that. I forgot the name of I just know the German title of the book. And he said it took 20 years to establish his thinking in academia, because it really takes time until people adapt and are also open and willing to new ideas and to new approaches. And it's the same thing with design science, and especially in entrepreneurship and innovation. It's quite at the beginning, so stuff is still sometimes a little bit crazy and difficult to follow. And this is the work that we are doing we're trying to do at the Design Science Center, to build a platform for academics around the world to improve this research method, because we all think it is important as we as academics are solving problems.
Interesting. And looking to the future itself, right? So what role do you think academia will play in the startup space? Do we still matter, or are we becoming just another content provider?
I would say academia is still a super important part of the future, especially as a place where people are evolving. So myself, I say, I mean, when I started to do my bachelor's, for me, it was important not only to go into the courses and write good grades, and that's it. For me, it was quite important to live this academic life. So to go into different lectures that have nothing to do with my own study background. So for example, I was in quite a lot of lectures in political science, and it was, I don't know, Tuesday in the evening, and I did not get any kind of credits for that, but it was super, super interesting for me to follow the conversations and to pick up the knowledge that is spread out there. And I think academia, it's that, a university is that, it's a place where people can explore different things. They can explore what's going out there in the world and improve themselves. And as I said quite at the beginning, it's all about the critical thinking and also to develop as a human being. And I think in academia, it's the place for that, because there you have the opportunity to develop yourself in the next 3 to 4 years to get the core skills and to use later on the core skills to be a successful entrepreneur. Because in this kind of area, you have this, it's like a playground, you know, you can test stuff, you can improve stuff. And one example for me was I was there's Enactus. It's a worldwide student initiative on social entrepreneurship, and the idea was to solve problems that are out there, so with an entrepreneurial mindset, so entrepreneurial spirit. And for me, it was quite interesting when I was a team leader to lead a team of students, because it was the first time that I was in a leading position, in a responsible position, and I just need to make sure that people are coming to our events, that they are still eager to be part of the team and want to improve their project. And I could not force someone to come, because it was a student initiative, so you cannot say you have to come, otherwise I have to force you to be there. And it was a lot of learning opportunities for me, how to be a good leader, a responsible leader. And I realized and saw things that went quite good, but stuff that was quite horrible. So for example, I did a lot of meetings in a week, and I realized that the people were just overwhelmed by all the meetings, because it was way too much. And I realized I have to let people some kind of go and do their own stuff, and just have a little less check in and check out calls and something like that. And this is something that I've learned in university, and it was a safe place, because nothing happened, because my leadership style was in this kind not really good, but nothing happened in the real world. But if you're in a startup and you acquire the resources, and you have your first hirings, and then you're in the leading positions, and you're doing the same mistakes in this kind of an environment, it can get costly, and therefore I think university is just a good place to explore stuff and to develop yourself.
Interesting. And if someone who is starting early now, thinking of starting something new, what's the one piece of advice you would give them from everything you have learned?
I mean, the most part is a little less talk, a little more action, I would say. It is. So the most stuff that I'm seeing, especially in the startup environment, is that people are talking a lot about their startup, you know. So especially if you're going to some startup fairs, and they're sitting there and explaining you what kind of cool stuff they're doing and how it will change the world and so on and so forth. And in most cases, it sounds quite interesting, but I would argue the most successful startups are those that are actually working. So instead of just posting everything on LinkedIn and explain where you're currently doing and which kind of business breakfast you're just attended to talk to people, really focus on your idea, focus on your startup, and really log in and do your stuff. And because I think a lot of people are, I mean, it's sometimes cool just to talk to you. And I founded my startup, it's a cool idea, and then they spread the word. But they're more focusing on communication rather than doing the job. And the second part, and I mean, it's the most crucial part, not only for startup, but also for corporates, is to solve a problem. And at the beginning, you really, really, really need to understand what is the problem and how are you solving the problem, and are people willing to pay for that you are solving the problem. And this is a really huge a learning opportunity that you will have there. And so I would say if you really want to found your own startup, look around in your community. What's the problem? How can you solve it? And then really stick on it and really focus on that and how to solve it. And then based on that, you will just get further and further, I would say.
Amazing. And the last one, where can people follow your work, whether it is DSC or ECP Business School or your latest papers or anything else you're part of entrepreneurship, innovation, or anything that is excited about you?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is just to follow me on LinkedIn. So just send me an invite, and we can stay in touch. And yeah, I mean, the most important stuff I'm sharing on LinkedIn, and I think it's probably the easiest and main source.
Great. This was incredible. So that's the wrap of today's episode of Tracxn School to Startup. We explored how design science, context, and policy shape real entrepreneurship beyond the hype. Huge thanks to Bugra for bringing clarity, depth, and a bit of fun to the conversation. If you have found this valuable, like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to click the bell so you never miss a new episode. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.